Today we're going to talk about how to take a Moneyball approach to running your law firm, essentially the economics to Moneyball, which is essentially a new age approach that is used predominantly in professional baseball, and it's based largely on advanced metrics and sabermetrics, which is a baseball term used for this sort of data collection and analysis. And essentially, there's a strategy in our theory, and what we've attempted to apply within our firm is how to use that type of strategy in a business setting. We've found some parallels between the two. So I'm going to go on and touch on that. But first, I wanted to give you guys a quick recap of Moneyball, what it is. Moneyball is a 2003 book. It was published by Michael Lewis. It was later adapted into a movie in 2011. It was Brad Pitt, you probably recognize, was in it. Jonah Hill was in it. It was nominated for some Academy Awards, some Oscars, so on and so forth. Essentially, the plot of the story, it followed the 2002 Oakland Athletics. This came after the 2001 season when a handful of their star players, Jason Giambi, Johnny Damon, Jason Isringhausen, they all elected for free agency, and essentially the Oakland Athletics had a notoriously stingy owner. And their general manager, Billy Beane, was forced to be pretty creative with how he assembled his team. And so he was forced to kind of look for different ways to put together a competitive team, and he started relying heavily on advanced metrics. He ended up meeting Peter Brand, who was the assistant general manager for the Oakland Athletics, where he was first taught about essentially these important data metrics that he could rely on. And together, they constructed this team of misfits. The overall premise was, in baseball, old traditionalists found that batting average and stolen bases and these traditional categories were what were needed to help create this really powerhouse of a team. With a limited budget, Billy Beane and Peter Brand, they determined that there's some other statistics that they could look at in terms of on-base percentage and WAR, which is wins above replacement. Not to get too technical with the baseball, I'm sure a lot of you don't even really care about that, but ultimately the point being, they put together with this limited budget this team of misfits. In doing so, they rattled off 20 consecutive wins, which is a major league record. They did this en route to winning the American League West, and they did it with the third lowest budget in Major League Baseball. So ultimately, the story of this is, it's a story of the little guy who's able to compete with the big guys. He was able to compete with the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox of the world. And ultimately, the metaphor that I'm using for this is there is opportunity for the little guy, for the smaller law firm, for the mid-sized law firm to compete with the TV lawyers, the ones who can just throw money at things. And obviously so, they've worked their way up to get there, and TV works for them. But truthfully, a lot of firms just don't have the budget or the resources in order to compete with that. So they're forced to look in other case types or in other directions or find other avenues. We are trying to put together a strategy that allows us to compete with some of the big guys in our market. So that said, wanted to introduce you to Lawrence Buckfire. He goes by Larry Buckfire. He's great. He's the visionary. He's the architect of our firm. In this case, he is the Billy Beane of this. I'm sure when he comes up, you will see such a striking resemblance between him and Brad Pitt. But ultimately, he is the one who essentially is the one who is responsible for putting together this team and constructing this roster. I'm the chief operating officer. I'm a certified baseball nerd. Baseball is my background. I covered the Detroit Tigers for 6 seasons as a beat writer. I'm the former Baseball Writers Association of America member. I'm all into this advanced metrics stuff. I pour over data, and then I collect it, and I'm the integrator. I present it to Larry, and then together we come up with a plan on how to implement this based on the analysis that we come together with. And ultimately, this is the team and the roster that we have created. This is our team of misfits. Batting first, we have Alyssa Moss. She's 4'11". She's a speedster. She's great. Batting second, Randy Blau. He's a right fielder. He might not look like he's a speedster, but he's great at drawing walks. And then batting cleanup, we have Bob Lancey. He's our big gun. He's the guy we give a lot of our big cases, and he hits them out of the ballpark. But what you need to know behind this is the face of our organization. These are our money makers, but ultimately it's the systems and the processes that we have implemented behind the scenes and the support team that is bought into this process that is really making the wheels, putting the wheels in motion and putting this together. And that's the important thing that I want you guys to recognize is you can have the greatest talent in the world, but unless you put systems and processes in place, and unless you're analyzing that data and generating accurate data that makes sense, that talent is not going to go anywhere. All right, Moneyball for business. The other thing that I think is really important to recognize is you don't have to graduate from Harvard. You don't have to graduate from Yale like Peter Brand did. If you are the business owner, Billy Beane, his background was in baseball, predominantly baseball. He's a baseball traditionalist. He'd tell you the same. But what the difference is about him, and what you notice with a lot of law firm owners is who are buying into this, is they appreciate the data, and they're willing to pump resources into this data and the advanced metrics and put the systems into hard work and process and believe in it. It's one of those things where if you commit to it, you're not going to see the changes immediately, but you have to buy into it, and you have to see it play out. The other thing is, so I mentioned this, like, you don't have to know the formulas. I guarantee that Billy Beane does not know the formula for WAR, which is wins above replacement. However, another thing to recognize before I go into this next slide, you have to make sure that you put an accountability practice and policy and procedure in place. You have to educate yourself. You have to know which questions to ask. In doing so, you might not know the exact formula for WAR, but you understand the importance of it, and you can ask and you can figure out if the talent that you're acquiring has good WAR. The other thing to recognize, don't be fooled by agencies. It's not okay to ignore what you've outsourced. You guys can't do it all, particularly with small to mid-sized law firms. It's impossible to build a team in-house. And truthfully, there's a lot of great experts out there who can do it better than you. And truthfully, from a logistical and from a financial standpoint, it makes complete sense to outsource. So know that when it comes to this, it's okay to outsource your branding. It's a very expensive process, and truthfully, there's experts out there who they can do creative better than you. They understand branding better than you. Same thing with website design and development. I suspect that probably 90% of you in this ballroom right here probably use WordPress as your content management system. You might use Joomla, you might use Movable Type. I know like Scorpion has its own in-house proprietary content management system, but when it comes to WordPress, it's open source, and there are tons of experts out there who have really good resources and can put together really good, from a technical SEO standpoint, really strong and structural website for you. Content marketing. Everyone has heard the old cliche of content is king. Also, content is time consuming. I mean, I don't know how long you guys know it takes to put together like a 2,500 word piece of content and publish it, but sometimes it's easier just to outsource. Social media marketing, local SEO. Sometimes it's easier just to hand the keys over for your Google My Business listing and have someone who has expertise in that area manage it for you. And then paid ad management. This is particularly an area where a lot of people end up outsourcing, particularly when it comes to Google ads, Facebook ads, the new feature with Google local service ads. It's easier to outsource. But the thing that I want to address, you have to educate yourself. If you don't educate yourself, you don't know what your agencies are delivering to you, and what you ignore will end up becoming problematic. So again, it's okay to outsource. You can't do it all alone. Delegate. But I wanted to identify some red flags, things that you should kind of identify if you are outsourcing this stuff to an agency, things that you should probably keep an eye out for. Your agency doesn't let you be 100% in control of your accounts. If you're handing over the keys to your Google My Business listing, don't let your agency be the owner. You need to be the owner. Let them be the manager of that particular account. I say that for a variety of your reasons, but most importantly, if you guys end up cutting ties with that agency, it's going to be a terrible process for trying to get those keys back. Your agency hides metrics from you. Your agency is going to show you what you want to see. If you start asking around, that's what you need to do. You need to be and educate yourself on which metrics you should be looking for and what's actually converting to money in your pocket. Again, your agency is going to show you what you want to see. And unless you're asking the right questions, they're not going to come out and show you, at least in some of the experience I have. I mean, you might have a very transparent agency who is working in your best interests. And if you do, that's the best. But these are questions that you should be asking. Your agency doesn't let you see your own ads. Generally speaking, a lot of agencies will just show you the paperwork and say, hey, look at how many impressions this ad showed. If you don't know what that ad is what the content and copy is on that ad, those impressions might be meaningless. So it's important for you to constantly review the ads that are being displayed. Your agency works for their bottom line, not for their clients. Again, you hope to have an agency that is working in your own best interest, but keep that in mind. All right, diversify. Just like you would treat your investment portfolio, you have to do the same thing for your digital presence and traditional presence. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. When it comes to PPC, local SEO, organic, local service ads, all of the above, you're gonna wanna, if you can, test the waters in all of it. Become acquainted with it, try to figure out what's working and what's not. But ultimately, one thing that I constantly wanna stress, if you're good at organic, that's great, but don't just continue to pump all of your money into that one arena. Who knows, one day you're on page 1 and the next day you might find yourself on page 3. If you're relying on ads or from leads that coming in strictly from organic, what I like to tell people all the time is you might be relying on Google for your leads and for your business, but I promise you Google is not relying on you for their business. One thing that I wanted to identify that again came with organic. Google Page Experience Update. Google has these core algorithm updates, which it launches relatively each quarter. You might like to think that your agency is telling you they know the exact algorithm formula. No one knows this exact. They might know some particular page ranking factors or some linking factors that are helping with boosting your ranking. But at the end of the day, it's not an exact science and no one knows the exact formula. For this Google Page Experience Update, this was initially meant to be launched in mid-May. It's been pushed to next month. I bring this to your attention only because it's an incredibly important algorithm update. If you haven't already attempted to address this on your website, you're going to want to start addressing it. It's going to focus predominantly on your mobile site. Your mobile usage, how well and how fast that page is rendering on mobile, if the text is remaining within the same screen of that particular mobile device. HTTPS, if you haven't already converted your site over and installed your SSL certificate, make sure that you have HTTPS and it's being served on that across the website. Ad techniques. Google wants to make sure, and again, it's all about user experience. If you've got ad techniques that are interrupting, that are just a little bit obtuse and distracting the user, interstitial pop-ups, I usually say with it, that is not a good practice necessarily on mobile. And then, there's a couple other page ranking factors, but I urge you all, look into the Google Page Experience Update. And if you haven't already done so, try to address that. You have about 1 more month until this update will be coming out. I'm gonna click X on that if I can. Cool. All right. Marketing in the Moneyball era. So again, what I like to tell people all the time is vanity metrics. What are vanity metrics? These are metrics that make you feel good. Your agency might show you, or your in-house SEO team, or your in-house marketing team, or even yourself. If you're doing your own analysis, you might get caught up on impressions, you might get caught up on likes, you might get caught up on followers. At the end of the day, these are great, these make you feel good, but does it actually convert to money in your pocket? Probably not. What you should be focusing on are metrics that matter most. These are conversion metrics. This is CPA. These are metrics that actually result in actionables. Your ROI, your profit margin. So here's a list of potential actionable metrics as well as vanity metrics. Again, impressions. You might have, your agency might show you and say, hey, we have 100,000 impressions that came from this particular campaign. That's great, excuse me. But if those impressions are being served on a search query that is completely irrelevant to any case type that you guys are offering, what's the point of those 100,000 impressions? Page views, same thing. You might have a blog post from 2006 that is completely irrelevant to a case type that you guys are even offering nowadays, but that particular blog post, for whatever reason, ranks really well and is generating tons of page views. Know where the page views are coming in from, and if the page views are actually relevant to what your firm is offering. Social media likes, we talked about, email subscribers, leads in the sales funnel. You can generate all the intakes and all the leads that you want in the world, but if those leads are irrelevant and not quality leads, what's the point of those leads? It's nice to see, but if it doesn't lead to actual signups, what's the point? Quality score is a metric by Google Ads. A lot of agencies will work really hard to pump up that Google quality score. And there actually is some relationship between a quality score and how your page and how your ad is served. But at the end of the day, if you have a really high quality score and you have a really high CPA, what's the point of having a high quality score? It's irrelevant. Your campaign isn't doing what you want it to do. Actionable metrics, like I said, you want converting users, you want conversion rates, social media engagement. You want people who are actually clicking on that ad, signing up, submitting form submissions, chat submissions, calling. That's what you want. Actionables. Move on to the next. Sorry. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to mention, back in the day, this is kind of something that we fell into. We found a lot of success back in the day from organic SEO. But one of the things that you should recognize is organic SEO 10 years ago is very different than what organic SEO looks like today. Nowadays, organic SEO, you've got the local service ads are on the top fold. You've got your Google Map Pack that's on the top fold. You've got your PPC ads in the top fold. Back in the day, when you ranked #1, you were at the top of the page on #1. Now, if you're #1 on organic SEO, you're on the bottom fold of that page. It doesn't quite serve as, it's not as valuable as it quite was in the past. That's the importance of diversification. And the other thing I wanted to mention about organic SEO, it's not free. I mean, we pumped a lot of time and labor into SEO. Larry, I consider him like a visionary when it comes to SEO. He was one of the first in the game to really take advantage of SEO and allow us to compete with some of the big names in our market. But there are a lot of costs associated with it. And not just the time and the labor, but the tools that you're using and purchasing for rank tracking, reporting, dashboards, analytics, the analytics and the plugins that you're purchasing through your content management system. The content itself is time consuming and laborious, and you might outsource. Sorry if I'm speaking too fast. This gets me pretty passionate and excited. Technical SEO. You guys pump a lot of, particularly technical SEO is incredibly important to the foundation of your website, but it's also incredibly expensive if you're trying to focus on page speed and how quickly your page is rendering. On-page and off-page SEO, you're pumping a lot of money into directories. You've all heard about the importance of NAP, which is your name, address, and phone number. You want to get listed in all these memberships and all these directories. Again, very time consuming. Link building is one of the hardest things to do. It's very manual intensive, very costly. Keyword research tools for that, SEO platforms, SEO tools like SEMrush, Moz, Screaming Frog. These are all tools that are very expensive that you guys have to take into account when it comes to organic SEO. And if you're budgeting for this stuff, recognize that it's not free. In-house SEO teams, if you've got a marketing team, you have to make sure you're taking that into account when you're budgeting for PPC, organic, all of these different types of platforms and arenas. SEO consulting is extremely expensive, SEO agencies. The other thing that I wanted to mention, just like anything else when it comes to PPC, when it comes to local, when it comes to TV, any sort of traditional, you can calculate organic traffic's return on investment. This is the formula for doing so. There's some sort of subjectiveness to it. At the end of this presentation, there's a slide deck that you can download, which will allow you to see that. But I highly recommend at least trying to calculate all the time and labor that you're putting into organic SEO to see how the actual cost output. All right, keyword level attribution. We've heard this throughout the day. Track everything. The godfather of management, Peter Drucker, said, if you, in order to manage something, you have to measure it. Eliminate the guesswork, improve your marketing efforts are working. There's a study that showed that companies that installed tracking are 17 times more likely to see profitable return on investment than those that aren't tracking. There's a study done by the Disruptive Advertising who did an audit of 2,000 Google AdWords accounts. Of those AdWords accounts, only 57% had Google tracking actually installed. That meant 43% of accounts had nothing to measure. How do you know if your campaign's working? Of the 53% or 57% that did have some sort of keyword level attribution and tracking installed, half of those accounts didn't have anything that was tracking anything worthwhile. Put the time and energy into making sure that your tracking is installed and installed properly. Now, what I mean by that is it's going to be different. A lot of you don't know how to implement and install that, but surround yourself with people who do know how to do it. If your agency is doing it, make sure that they're doing it correctly. And the other thing too is the power of API. API is application programming interface. We had some vendors up here who are talking about some platforms that allow you to do it all. Some of them are CRMs that have their intake management platform installed in it, their content management. It's a three-way program that does everything. A lot of us don't have that. I know we at our firm, we have our own intake management platform, we have our own case management platform, and then we have our own content management platform. We do this for a variety of reasons. We found that our intake management platform just offers a little bit more robust features that allow us to kind of utilize intake in a way that content or our case management platform, which we use as Needles, just doesn't quite offer. But we still want that intake management platform to communicate with that case management platform. Everything needs to talk with one another. And the reason being is when you're tracking that data, you're able to parse that through. You're able to glean that information that you're getting from the initial funnel in the content management system, pushing it through into your intake management system. When you sign up that case and move it over to Needles, you're able to bring all of that information and data from that user over into Needles. You can start tracking the ROI from the moment you sign up, from the moment that you actually generate that lead. This is an analogy that I like to use. It kind of helps people understand what APIs do, but essentially it's the restaurant analogy. Consider yourself, you're the user, you're the guy who enters the restaurant. The waiter is essentially the API. He takes your order, brings it to the kitchen, which is the database. The database pumps out the food. That is the data. But the importance of APIs, again, you probably don't know how to integrate or configure an APIs. So good news, client support, they do. This is one thing I tell, this isn't necessarily Moneyball in the sense of advanced metrics, but it's Moneyball in the sense of you're being smart with your money. When you legal industry software, it's expensive. The licensing that you're getting, it's expensive. But guess what? These features and this licensing that you're offering, they offer client support with it. They offer a lot of training and implementation. And if you say, listen, I need to configure an API, I need my intake management system to talk with my case management system, they will gladly help do that. And there's many reasons that they do that. One, it handcuffs you to that platform. They kind of like that. If you are using their resources and you're forcing the intake management platform to communicate with the case management platform, it makes you that much less likely to ever cut ties with that intake management system. So of course they're going to offer that client support and say, yeah, I would gladly help configure that API. More importantly, if you talk to any of these vendors, I would guarantee that the majority of the majority of those platforms would say, yeah, our clients are only using about like 20% of the features that we offer within this platform. So they love interacting. They love letting you know and installing new features and customizing features to make sure that you're using all 100% of this platform that they've invested so heavily in. All right, the answer isn't always more leads. What do I mean by that? You can spend all the time, energy, and labor into configuring this great marketing department that is generating thousands of leads. But look inward first. Make sure that your departments are capable of handling these leads. This is one thing that I think a lot of firms have trouble with is doing kind of an internal audit and making sure that their intakes department is capable of handling these leads so they're not just wasting money on this valuable marketing that they're generating. The example that I like to give is you spent $10,000 on a monthly PPC campaign. Within that PPC campaign, you generated 20 conversions in the form of form submissions, chat submissions, calls. Of those 20 conversions, 10 met criteria and were good to sign up. So you sent out fee agreements on 10 of them. Of those 10 that you sent out fee agreements from, only one signed up with your firm. So if you look at that and you're the firm president saying, one signed up, you spent $10,000 on that marketing campaign, I'm not going to put any more money into that particular marketing campaign. That's the wrong way of thinking. At first glance, the CPA, the cost per acquisition of that case, is $10,000 per case. Obviously, it's incredibly high, but the true problem is the conversion rate. That's well shy of our firm's goal, which is 85%. Look inward. The true problem with that isn't marketing. It's your intakes workflow. That's where you have to go within your intakes and figure out, you sent out 10 fee agreements. Why did you only retain one of those? What's going on? So that's the importance of with your intake management system, making sure that there's a workflow in place, and making sure that there's an accountability systemization that you've put in place to make sure that you're holding your intake specialists accountable and setting KPIs to make sure that they're meeting those goals. Marketing data. All right, so this is kind of where we get a little bit to the advanced metrics. More so, it's pointing you guys in the right direction, knowing what you should look for. So what matters? Conversion rate. So this conversion rate for marketing is obviously your CPA. It's the cost divided by the total number of conversions. The click-through rate. This is engagement. So it's the number of clicks divided by the number of impressions. You obviously want people to click whenever an ad is being served. That's the impression. You want to make sure people are clicking on it. The return on ad spend. The amount of money and the return that you have within that investment. And then again, the return on investment, the net value divided by the total cost of that investment. What doesn't matter? The overall bounce rate. Usually agencies will say, well, look, we have one of the best bounce rates within this campaign. Well, that might be true, but if a user is spending 2 minutes on a particular page, and it's a page that is irrelevant to your firm or what, let's say, again, I go back to the 2006 blog post, and that's generating a user that's on that particular page for 2 minutes. What's the point? Who cares if you got a good bounce rate? Page views. Again, you can generate all the page views in the world, but if it's not leading to conversions, what's the point of those page views? View count. Same thing with videos. You can spend a lot of money on getting your in-stream video in YouTube served all over the place. But unless people are actually clicking and converting and calling on that video, it doesn't matter. Social page likes and email open rate. Again, you can have a great subject head within your email. People might be clicking on that email, but unless they're actually converting into users, it's not going to matter. All right, so we've done the marketing. Now here comes intakes. What matters within intakes? This is the conversion rate again, but it's a different type of conversion rate. Again, how many fee agreements are you sending out and how many fee agreements are you getting back? That's the conversion rate, and that's the metric that you want to measure. That will help determine the success of your intake team. The average response time. I think John had mentioned one of the vendors. We set a goal within our team. You got to be 5 minutes on that lead. You can set up automation so you can have like an automatic text account, but ultimately we like getting a live person to respond to that lead immediately within 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, the likelihood of you signing up that lead drops by 50%. Total leads by marketing source. This allows you to track the success of any given campaign. The average score by case type. So this is really important. We put a grading scale in play. It's subjective in nature. It's a 1 through 6 grading scale that we use within our firm. But what we try to do is try to create hard criteria for our intake specialists to follow. If it's a hot lead, they grade it a 6. If it's a solicitation, if it's something completely irrelevant to what we offer, we grade it a 1. In doing so, if you apply that scale to all of your campaigns, you're able to start understanding which campaigns are working and which campaigns aren't. The assigned leads by specialists. This is a metric that we use to kind of help identify the team productivity of our intake specialists. Again, if you're not setting KPIs for all of your departments, get on it. Set KPI. First, glean the data, review the data, analyze the data, and then set KPIs to make sure that they're following and they're actively trying to meet those goals. What doesn't matter? When it comes to intake data, truthfully, as long as the data is accurate, every bit of data helps. For me, I like looking at the conversion rate by case type. I like looking at the conversion rate by contact source. What's your conversion rate by calls versus conversion rate by chats versus conversion rate by form submissions? If you start recognizing that your conversion rate by calls is significantly better than your conversion rate by online submission forms, on your website, start plastering that number more so than your form submission box. You really should probably start emphasizing the number. That obviously is a little bit better in terms of conversion. All right, so then we get to case management and attorney data. What matters? Settlements by marketing source. We want to measure from the moment that user has generated that lead, from the moment that intake has signed up that lead, to the moment that that case has now been settled. You're able, through the course of time, to identify and figure out the return on investment for any particular campaign. Total fees by attorney. So this is the total fees divided by the total dollar percentage of fees. Total fees by case type, same thing. Fees versus costs by attorney is the expense percentage of any given attorney. The case valuation estimate versus the actual. This is really important for a variety of reasons. If you guys aren't consistently valuating cases and then analyzing this, post settlement, the actual settlement number that came from that, you need to start doing it. This will help you start, one, identifying the team productivity of your litigating staff or your pre-lit staff, but more importantly, you'll start identifying by case type which cases make most sense for you guys to continue to pursue. And also, you want to make sure from a consistency level that one attorney is evaluating cases the same way another attorney is evaluating. You want to start creating this consistency by putting these systems in place and making sure that everyone is basically following the same criteria for how they're evaluating cases. And then the Pareto point. Tim had spoke about this briefly, but ultimately this is incredibly important. This is a report that basically identifies the top 20% of all of the cases that you currently have within your inventory, and making sure essentially what you do from this, the actuals that you take, is making sure that you're investing more time, more resources, more energy and labor into those top 20% of those cases. Those are your gold mines, right? Those are the ones that will pay off, and you should be investing more time into that than, let's say, a dog bite that might end up settling for $10,000. What doesn't matter? Again, similar to intakes, every bit of data helps when it comes to case management and attorney data, as long as the data is properly gleaned and properly analyzed. All right, so the work never stops. I think more and more people recognize the importance of data. People recognize the importance of automation. I think nowadays people recognize that there are tools out there that help gather this data more effectively, more efficiently, and more easily. But just recognize, because you have the data, that's the first part. That's only 50% of what you guys need to do. It's really hard to glean that data. It's very hard to put dashboards in place and to analyze that data, but that's only 50% of the problem. The next hardest part is putting systems and processes in place to make sure that you're actually adhering to the data that you gleaned. That's the hard part, making sure that you put accountability in place, making sure that people are living up to those systems and processes, and making sure that there's a consistent approach across the law firm. That is it for me. I'm going to bring up Larry. He's kind of the visionary, the architect. He's the smart guy. I just give him the data. So thanks, guys.
So James had me as the starting pitcher in today's lineup. I lost the video now, so I'm having all kinds of technical. There we go. But I'm actually throwing relief. Just to simplify, you had a lot of information given to you, and primarily I'm a trial lawyer. So trial lawyers are very good, and we specialize in taking complex information from expert witnesses, medical and scientific evidence, and simplifying it for jurors who have no background or understanding of these things. And essentially, what the point of this exercise is in this presentation is to show you that you can compete with larger firms, you can compete in a crowded market. There are things that you can do on a smaller, intelligent, sophisticated level to successfully get new cases and process your cases and so forth. I took over, my firm was started by my father in 1969. My mother went back to law school in 1978. The two of them practiced together. And when I graduated law school, I joined them. And then my younger brother joined us, and he has since retired about 7 years ago. So I run the show. And we're a personal injury and medical malpractice firm. I handle cases all throughout the entire state of Michigan. But I am the decision maker, ultimately, because it's my firm, and it's what I do with the data. So data tells a story. And in order to tell a story, you need to have context. If somebody just shows you, if somebody just comes and shows you some of the statistics and the numbers James provided to you, it means nothing to you. You have to understand it within the context. And so here's an example using a baseball box score. It's LSU for the guys from Dudley DeBosier, of course. And you can look at this box score and say to yourself, well, look at this number, this hitter, Zach Watson. He played center field. He was 2 for 4, had an RBI. He had a great game. And I used to wake up every morning as a kid when there were newspapers, and I would read the box scores all the time. And you can look at the box score and you can understand maybe some individual performances, but you don't really understand what happened in the game. And so, perhaps this kid had a great game, had 2 for 4, but he may have struck out with the bases loaded and made the game-losing error. And so just looking at the numbers alone doesn't tell you the actual true story. You need the context, you need the analysis, and the data needs to give you a purpose. So I went to the University of Michigan as an undergraduate. I majored in economics, and I took a lot of classes in psychology. And I've always been very fascinated by how people make decisions. There's a lot of really good books on behavioral economics, behavioral marketing, things of that nature. And it's really fascinating if you ever have a time to read any. You may have even seen studies where, for example, in Costco, they've done studies where if they want to sell jelly or jam, they'll take 3 jars and put it on a table and see how many people buy the jelly that day. And then on the next day, they'll put out 15, give you way more choices. And it turns out that people buy much less because the more choices you give people, it makes it much more difficult and confusing, and they don't want to make any choices, so they're done. So there's all kinds of studies and ways to determine how people make decisions, and we use that extensively in our marketing efforts. So there are 2 ways that people primarily make decisions. It's through intuition or through processes. The processes are things like objective data, hard work, and it's very effortful. For intuition, it's something like subjective confidence. You just feel like you have the ability, without any real information or data, to make the right decision. And quite often, you're wrong. I mean, a lot of us who here are trial lawyers? Do we have a bunch of trial lawyers in here? So the trial lawyers are people who go to court. We're really familiar with judges who have subjective confidence. They feel like they don't have to read your brief, they don't have to know anything about the facts, but they're so smart that they can make a decision on your case. And usually it's a wrong decision. Intuition is typically instinctive. You feel like you can quickly make the right decision. And quite often your instincts in certain circumstances are correct. And there's nothing wrong with using your instincts, especially if there's an emergency situation and you need to react quickly. That's fine. But when you're doing business analysis and marketing analysis, you don't want to necessarily just be instinctive. And intuition is effortless. It doesn't take you much effort to arrive at your decision or to calculate the reason you came to that decision. And the difference are processes. Processes are the things like James has talked about, is looking at data, analyzing data, and making those decisions. It's a lot of hard work to do, but it's the right way to make your decision. Now, I want everybody to grab your pen and paper. I'm going to give you a math question and ask you to answer it. And I'm using baseball. It's a perfect baseball one. You have 30 seconds. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Write it down. Everyone write it down. Has everybody got to the answer? You're all comfortable with the answer? How many of you said 10 cents? Raise your hand. What other numbers do we have? What was that? It's a nickel. That's it. Most people, in fact, 50% of Ivy League students got that question wrong. I got it wrong. I gave it to every lawyer in my office who got it wrong. I gave it to my wife, who's a physician, who got it wrong. You're one of the only people persons that I know who's actually got it right. My son, who is in 11th grade, and my nephews in 10th grade are the only other people who got it right. And when I asked them how they got to that answer, they actually went through the process. They went through the formula of figuring out how to do it. It took more effort. Someone like me, I instinctively thought I knew the answer. It seemed so simple and quick that I could arrive at the right answer, but I was wrong. And the reason I bring up this example to you is that quite often in business and in marketing, we feel like we want to make these quick decisions, that we can do things instinctively, impulsively. You don't. Well, you may only be able to divide by 3, but I'd be happy to explain it. The bat cost $1 more than the ball. So if the bat costs $1 more than the ball and they add to $1.10, it has to be $1.05 for the bat and 5 cents for the ball. It's $1 more. See, you got see it. So it's actually. Yeah. Believe me, I struggled the same way you did, and most people do. And if I rush through it, the answer and presume that you all understood it once I told you the right answer, I was wrong. But that's the example I'm trying to show, is that instinctively, see, the accountant got it right, Tim got it right. But instinctively, we jumped to the conclusion that we were smart enough to guess it really quick. But if you had gone through the process, if you had written it down on your pen and paper and figured it out, I'm hoping you would have got the right answer. And so it's important to, when you make decisions, to use the processes. And that's why James' presentation on gathering all this data and reviewing it is important, because that's what you need to make an educated and sophisticated decision, especially if you're in a competitive market, and especially when there's a lot of money at stake. I mean, you know, lawyers spend a small fortune each month on all kinds of their marketing. And if you're just doing what you think works as opposed to analyzing the data to find out what works, then you're making a big mistake. This is a really good book I read. It's called Upstream, and it's fascinating because it talks about how people and organizations can best solve problems by looking at them when there's upstream and there's downstream. So upstream, imagine a river or a body of water where there's upstream, and downstream they keep finding all these dead fish. And they use that example. And, you know, looking downstream, the problem is, hey, look, we have all these dead fish. But what you really have to do is look upstream and find out why the fish are all dying, because that's where you have to solve the problem. And we try to use data to analyze things that are upstream. For example, we had an issue, and I don't know if other people track this, but how many call hangups we were getting each month from intakes? How many people were actually called and then ultimately hanging up? And we were spending a lot of time tracking these things, counting the numbers and tracking them, and actually having people, our intake people, call people back saying, hey, we saw that you called and you hung up. And we were getting new cases. We were connecting with people who had called us, they were interested, they hung up, and they would have never called us back. But by us grabbing their numbers and calling them back, we were signing up cases. They were good leads. And so we found that fascinating. And I decided to, let's get the data, and let's not spend our time downstream trying to find out why people, you know, why we have to chase all these calls. Let's start at the upstream and figure out, how do we stop these people from hanging up, or what is causing them to hang up? And so if you work upstream and get them to stop hanging up or solve that problem, then you don't have to worry about solving the problem downstream. So we looked at a lot of data, and we started to investigate it further. And it turns out that we had people on hold for too long. You know, they would call, we would put them on hold, they were on hold for too long. There were people who were calling, they were calling the wrong number. You know, for pay-per-click, we were buying some competitors' names, which is pretty common in pay-per-click, and people buy ours. And they would they would find out we weren't the right people and they were hanging up. So there were all kinds of reasons that they were hanging up. But by analyzing the data and starting to make that determination, we stopped the problem upstream. So the number of our hangups downstream decreased substantially. We do a lot of testing, and data is very important for testing. So one of the things that I think attorneys have a problem with, and a lot of people have issues with, is what they like. So you might show somebody your web page, your spouse or your kid or someone in your office, and say, how do you like this? How do you like this website? And they'll say, oh, I like the green color. It looks good. You know, I like the picture of you and so forth. They might like your TV ads. They might like different things. But the fact is, it's not what you like. It's not what your friends like. It's what the people who you want to be your clients like. And everybody makes that mistake, right? So you have to determine what the client likes. And so we test everything. And when I mean everything, I'm talking about our landing pages for pay-per-click. I'm talking about the ads that we write for pay-per-click and things of that nature. And then we use that information and that testing to finally come up to the right landing page. So a typical landing page might be, if you search Michigan car accident lawyer and Google pay-per-click, you know, we spent $150 to get someone to our page. You know, we want to make sure when they get to that page that we have everything appealing to them that will convert them into a client. And so we design the site, we design the content, everything else, and then we compare one page to another page. And after time, we determine on what is the page that produces the best leads. Where do you start? So a lot of the things that James discussed, it's very confusing and complex. You know, I educated myself, I immersed myself, I went to all these seminars and conferences over the years. And, you know, the fact is I've run some mastermind marketing groups with some really intelligent lawyers and great marketers, and they just don't want to learn it, which is fine. If you're not going to learn it, but you want to compete on this level, hire yourself a knowledgeable person like James, who does know how to do that. But you can invest in your education by going to different conferences you can attend. There's all kinds of marketing conferences, and on the slide I'm listing some that are for search engine optimization and from pay-per-click and so forth. And the real thing is that anyone who has spent a lot of money in digital marketing, you may have been with one vendor, you may have changed to another vendor, but the one thing that you learn is that they come and they start showing you spreadsheets and graphs and so forth. And a lot of it, you know, without offense to any vendors here or anybody else, a lot of it is like snake oil. And, you know, if you don't have the good data to make the decisions, you're not going to be allocating your funds the right way, and you're not going to be maximizing your budget. And you're certainly not going to be able to compete on a low market budget with the big TV spenders and other people in your market. And the fact is, you know, the more money you spend on advertising and marketing, the more cases you get. It's really that simple, but you know, not everybody has the ability to write bottomless checks or run up their credit cards. So if you want to do what we did, you need to create a Moneyball kind of atmosphere, get the good data, analyze it, and then make decisions on that data rather than just basically on your instincts.